one of the most frustrating things about Tucker's shtick, and I do at this point think it's purely shtick. I think that Tucker is very good at convincing himself he's passionate and sincere about things, but it's pretty much the George Costanza version of truth telling. He convinces himself he's telling the truth in the moment and then turns it off later. And I think he's fundamentally operating in bad faith. But Tucker has this rhetorical trick, which is very effective. He's very good at it, where he makes a really bold assertion. We now know that squirrels are in fact agents of Finland trying to undermine our government, and no honest person can disagree.
In retrospect, it is clear the 2020 election was a grave betrayal of American democracy. Given the facts that have since emerged about that election, no honest person can deny it. Happy Monday. We've had a few days to reflect on it and have concluded that no honest person could believe that the raid on Donald Trump's home last week was a legitimate act of law enforcement. It was not.
That's how he always says this. No honest person, as if there is no room for reasonable debate about something that almost demands reasonable debate that, in fact, Tucker has the wrong interpretation on. And so absolutely it's true. I think the January 6th commission was not the ideal format. Whose fault is that? Well, large part it's Republicans' fault, because originally it was going to be a big blue ribbon commission kind of thing like the 9/11 commission. Republicans nixed that. And then you can say, well, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let Jim Jordan and all these people on. Perfectly fine to debate that. We've had that conversation a million times here. Would the fact-finding have been better if it had been a more adversarial thing? Sure. I think that's absolutely true. I think that the January 6th committee got too caught up in just selling a narrative, but that doesn't mean the narrative was fundamentally wrong. And the narrative was that a bunch of goons at the encouragement, if not the behest or incitement, and we're not going to turn Sarah into lawyer Sarah, but were encouraged by the President of the United States in their own hearts and minds to do great violence at the Capitol, to intimidate Congress. I've argued from the beginning that if no one had stormed the Capitol, what Trump did that day was inexcusable, because what he was trying to do was politically intimidate an equal branch of government by sending a mob out there to heckle people. And he's open about that. He's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go down there, and if you want to take the most pro-Trump interpretation of it possible and put all the weight in the world on his, we're going to go down there peacefully stuff, it was still outrageous, right? Like, if the President of the United States sent a mob of protesters to the Supreme Court while it was deliberating to shout at them through the conference room window, it would be outrageous. This was even worse. So, because the intent behind it was to essentially stage a coup. So, I am fine with a lot of these points that people are making, that it would have been better if there was a more normal committee hearing, a more normal approach. But a lot of these things we actually knew, and that's part of Tucker's shtick, is to take facts that were actually in the record, but because his audience, particularly his biggest fans, are woefully uninformed about stuff that Tucker doesn't want them to know, he can then say, it's still an open question about how, the guy from the Royal Order of the Buffalo got into the Capitol, when it's not. Like, there's a deep record about this, about how it happened, why it happened. This idea that the cops were just taking people on tours is factually wrong. This is part of the whole violence de-escalation thing. So it's all bad faith. And so getting back to the political question, I love that if it's sincere, that these guys think that this was going to make, so you had Scalise was asked the other day about this, and he says, it seems like a lot of people in the press just want to talk about January 6th. And the implication was, like, McCarthy released this stuff so we wouldn't talk about January 6th anymore, right? That we would put this stuff to bed. He says he released this in the name of transparency. Well, if it's in the name of the transparency, you release it to everybody. You make it public domain. Disagree with Steve about the security stuff, but that's not a really interesting argument, I think. If you're going to release it in the name of transparency, you wouldn't release it to the one person you can count on to distort the tapes and quote them selectively to support a bogus conspiracy theory thesis in the first place. So I think they have self-owned. I think that that Kevin McCarthy is proving his gift to foghorn leghorn walk through a field, field of rakes. I know Foghorn Leghorn isn't the one who stepped on him. It was actually the dog that Foghorn Leghorn tormented. I apologize for that error. Please don't send me emails. But I think it's a remarkably pathetic spectacle.